I never saw the attack that crippled our ship. None of US did. The Mercator Gloriana was only a bulk freighter, hauling food shipments across the outer reaches of the Mandragora sector. Nothing valuable. Nothing worth targeting. At least, that's what we believed. Maybe that's exactly why they chose us. The ship groaned around me as I pressed my ear against a rusted wall, straining to make out the faint echoes of gunfire and screaming that bled through the Vox system. Hours earlier, the captain had ordered us to secure the secondary cargo base. Now, only static came through the channels. Broken now and then by a dying voice begging for mercy. None was ever given. I wasn't a fighter, just a third-class voidsman. My life had been spent repairing pipes, patching corroded wires, and crawling through forgotten maintenance shafts. I'd done 30 years aboard ships like this, and I knew when a vessel was dying. The Gloriana shuddered violently. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power grid failed. For an instant, I saw the fear carved into the faces of the dozen men and women hiding with me in that cramped storage bay. Each clutched whatever makeshift weapon they could find, waiting for death to climb closer deck by deck. "We need the escape pods," Hollins whispered. His voice cracked. He was older than me, more experienced, but fear had hollowed him out. "The pods are 3 decks up," I told him, "and whatever's out there stands between us and them." The deck lurched again. A sickening vibration ran through the floor. We were entering atmosphere. A void ship wasn't built for this. It wasn't meant to touch ground. Someone had hijacked navigation, dragging us down toward the agri-moon below. Whether it was desperation from our bridge crew or the careful design of our attackers, I couldn't tell. The storage room door hissed open, and we all raised our weapons. Relief flooded us when Ingencia Thale entered, his mechadendrites twitching with agitation. "They have taken the bridge," he said. His mechanical voice was flat, almost cold. "They are not interested in prisoners." "Who are they?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. Thale's glowing eyes shifted. "Night Lords." The name dropped into the silence like a death sentence. Not pirates. Not raiders. Not even the cruel Dark Eldar. No. These were traitor Astartes, once the Emperor's champions. Now twisted monsters from the warp, returned to spread terror across the Imperium. "We will impact Agrippina Minor in 22 minutes, Thale continued. "This section of the ship has a 17% chance of surviving the crash. 17%. Better odds than facing what stalked the halls above. I will never forget the impact, the shriek of tearing metal, the sudden weightlessness when gravity failed, the crushing blow that hurled me against a bulkhead and shattered my bones. Then, only darkness. When I finally woke, I was pinned beneath a collapsed cargo stanchion, blood thick in my mouth. The compartment around me had become a graveyard of broken steel and broken bodies. The only light came from small electrical fires sputtering in torn wiring. I didn't yet know I was the only one left alive in that compartment. I didn't yet realize that my true ordeal was only beginning. I hadn't been spared for mercy. I'd been chosen, not for a quick death, but for a slow lesson in fear, one that would stretch across 7 harrowing days. The Night Lords weren't just killing us. They were hunting, and I had become their prey. It took nearly an hour to pull myself free from the wreckage. Every movement drove knives of pain through my broken bones. But terror lent me strength I never thought I had. The crash had torn the ship apart, and the storage bay now lay open to Agrippina Minor's air. Through the ripped hull, I saw the alien sky, a bruised purple streaked with amber as the distant sun slid toward the horizon. Hollins was skewered on a jagged shard of metal, his eyes frozen in disbelief. Ingencia Thale lay twisted among his sparking augmetics, more machine than man, even in death. The rest had been crushed or torn apart by the impact. I alone remained. It was Hollins who saved me, in a way. His waxed utility coat, slick with his blood, was thick enough to shield me from the elements. His boots replaced the ones the crash had destroyed. His belt held a Navy-issue knife, a dented canteen, and a flickering lamp that only worked when shaken hard. Clutching these meager supplies, I stood at the edge of the shattered hull and looked out over Agrippina Minor. Once, it had been a thriving agri-moon, feeding the great cities of Mandragora Tertius. Now it stretched before me as a wasteland, abandoned fields, empty hab-blocks, and a wind that carried the scent of wet soil, decay, and something harsher, smoke, maybe, or worse. I knew I couldn't stay. If the Night Lords were hunting, they would come here first. My only chance was to find an outpost, a Vox relay, anything that might call for rescue. The last scraps of daylight would help cloak my escape, but I had no illusions about what the night would bring. As I prepared to climb down the torn hull, something caught my eye. On the inner wall, painted in what could only be fresh blood, was a symbol, a winged skull, lightning bolts bursting from its eye sockets, the mark of the 8th Legion. Beneath it, a single word in jagged script. Run. They already knew. They'd been here. This wasn't blind slaughter. This was a game. With shaking hands, I gathered my stolen gear and lowered myself into the alien landscape, every nerve screaming that unseen eyes were on me. I didn't know how long I could last. I didn't know what horrors waited in the dark. I only knew one thing. If I stopped moving, I was finished. The land around the crash was broken and wild, once planted fields now left to rot. The Gloriana had gouged a vast trench through the soil, littering the plain with twisted wreckage for kilometers. In the distance, I saw larger pieces of the ship burning, sending black smoke curling into the evening sky. Instinct told me to run, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the graveyard of steel behind me. The Night Lords would surely start their hunt at the wreck. Using the setting sun as my guide, I set off at an angle to the crash trail, aiming for a tree line about 2 kilometers away. Every step was agony. My broken ribs shifted with each breath, and fire shot through my arm whenever my shattered collarbone moved. But fear kept me moving, one stumbling foot after another across the scarred ground. I'd made it about halfway when I heard it. At first, I thought it was my imagination, a faint, rhythmic clicking like armored boots moving slowly, deliberately, across hard ground. It came from behind me, growing closer. I didn't look back. Some primitive instinct screamed that if I turned, if I acknowledged the hunter, I was finished. Instead, I pushed forward as quickly as my ruined body would allow, resisting the urge to break into a full sprint. Running would only make the end come faster. The clicking stopped. For a heartbeat, I let myself believe I'd imagined it. Then a voice drifted through the air, carried by a voxcaster, yet whispered as though right at my ear. Your fear has a scent. Little one. Sweet. Overripe. We can taste it on the air. The voice was deep, resonant, wrong. It carried notes no human throat could produce. Something that had once been a man but had been twisted by 10,000 years of hate. And the warp. 17 survivors scattered across this husk of a world. It continued. By dawn, there will be 16. By week's end, none. But who shall be first to feed our hunger? I reached the tree line just as the sun dipped beneath the horizon. The forest was unlike anything I'd seen before, pale, bone-white trunks rising like pillars into a canopy of crimson leaves. The undergrowth was sparse, letting me slip between the trees despite my wounds. I shook Holland's battered lamp until its beam flickered weakly to life, just enough to see the ground. Fallen leaves muffled my steps, a blessing in the silence. Hours passed in a blur of pain and dread. I didn't dare stop. To stop was to die. Twin moons rose, washing the forest in silver, light that broke through the canopy in fractured patterns. In that strange glow, I noticed details I'd missed. The trees were no wild growth. They stood in precise rows, the remains of an old orchard, long abandoned. Once, this place had fed millions. Now, the trees were left to rot, their branches heavy with pale fruit that gleamed in the moonlight like skulls. Thirst clawed at me, my canteen already half empty. Yet every instinct told me not to touch them. This orchard was no place of nourishment. It was a trap, a slow poison. My fears were confirmed when I stumbled upon a body. It lay curled at the base of one of the larger trees, shriveled and preserved by dry air. Not a victim of the crash, nor of the Night Lords. This one had died long ago, back when this moon still lived. In its brittle hand was one of the pale fruits, a single bite taken from its flesh. I wondered what had doomed this world. Disease? Warp corruption? Or simply bureaucratic neglect? A world lost in imperial paperwork until its people withered away. Such things happened often enough. That's when the sound came again. Closer now. That sound again. The slow, deliberate click of ceramite boots. They had followed me into the forest, tracking me with senses far sharper than my own. I snapped the lamp off and pressed myself against a bone-white trunk, forcing my breath into shallow, silent gasps. We can hear your heart. little one. The voice whispered through the trees. Such a fragile rhythm. So easy to stop. I dared not move. Even swallowing felt dangerous, as if the smallest sound might betray me. The voice wasn't coming from one direction. It was everywhere, as though the forest itself had become the hunter's mouth. There is no escape from the sons of Nostromo. We were born in darkness, raised on fear. It is our food, our gift, our trade. Something shifted in the undergrowth to my right, too heavy, too deliberate to be anything natural. For an instant, I saw it, armor the color of midnight, talons gleaming silver in the moonlight. Then it was gone again, moving with terrifying grace for something so massive. They were toying with me. They could have ended it in a heartbeat. But where was the pleasure in that? I wasn't prey to be killed. I was fear to be cultivated, terror to be savored. Only when I felt sure they'd withdrawn, at least for now, did I move again. I had no plan beyond survival, no destination except away. By night's end, the trees began to thin. Shapes emerged in the distance, silhouetted against the starlit sky. When dawn finally broke over Agrippina Minor, I stood at the edge of a forgotten settlement. Once, this place had thrived, fields stretching outward in ordered rows, hab blocks towering at the center like monuments of survival. Storage silos and processing plants stood abandoned, their work long ceased. And above it all, rising in lonely defiance, was an imperial shrine, its spires reaching heavenward, still proclaiming faith to a god-emperor who had long since forgotten this world. If anywhere on this moon offered a chance at salvation, it would be there. Shrines often held vox arrays, sometimes even hidden supplies, weapons, or forgotten shuttles. As the pale sun climbed higher into the purple sky, I began the cautious trek down toward the ruins. Hope and dread warring in my chest. Hope that rescue might still be possible. Dread that I was stepping into a trap set with meticulous cruelty. Both feelings, I would soon learn, were justified. The worst lessons the Night Lords had to teach were still ahead. I crept forward, carefully, using whatever cover I could find, scanning every shadow for pursuit. In daylight, the settlement's decay was plain to see. Hab blocks sagged, their walls weathered and stained by storms. Fields once carefully tilled now ran wild, overrun by choking weeds. And then, as I neared the main road, I saw them. At first, I thought they were only old decorative posts lining the street. As I drew closer, the truth of those posts revealed itself. Corpses, dried and stretched by sun and wind, had been speared on metal spikes and left to rot. Some were recent, flesh still sloughing from bone. Others were little more than bones and tattered skin from long before. This wasn't collapse or accident. It was a message etched in suffering. The Night Lords had been here before, perhaps, many times, using this forgotten moon as a private hunting ground. I skirted the main approach, avoiding the street with its gruesome markers, and moved toward the back of the largest hab block, where a partial collapse had left a jagged opening. I waited, listening. When the coast seemed clear, I darted across the open ground and slipped inside. The smell hit me, rot and filth, and something more human. The stink of recent habitation, not of the original colonists, but of whoever or whatever had taken shelter. Here after the fall, windows were boarded or smashed, the panes patched with scavenged metal and cloth. I shook the lamp to life. Its thin beam cut through the dark to reveal a makeshift camp, bedrolls of filthy rags, a blackened fire ring in the old communal hall, crude tools and implements cobbled from broken metal. Someone had been surviving here, until they hadn't. Hello. The word left my mouth before I could stop it, and it rang hollow through the empty rooms. The sound seemed to multiply, returning to me in echoes until I felt as if 100 voices answered at once. Only the skittering of vermin and the settling groan of the building replied. I climbed to the second floor, where the old dormitories still stood. Rows of rotted cots lay collapsed. The plaster walls told the real story. Every surface was covered in frantic writing, some painted, some scratched with fingers, others written in dried blood. Pleas and accusations, slashed into the walls. They come at night. The Emperor has abandoned us. No escape from the sons of Kos. They feed on fear. Scrawled among the pleas were the Night Lords. Symbols again and again, the winged skull and lightning. Bolts, repeated like a mantra. Some panels were defaced with scenes of torture and mutilation, drawn with a cold, practiced hand that suggested the artist had watched the horrors firsthand. In the center of the room, a circle of chairs had been arranged. 12 of them held bodies, bound by rusted wire at wrists and ankles, in various states of decay. The 13th chair faced them all and was empty except for a folded scrap of parchment. My hands shook as I picked it up and opened it. The handwriting inside was unexpectedly neat, almost elegant, cruel in its courtesy. We left one alive to tell the tale. She has already served her purpose. Now you shall take her place, Void's man. Your story will be different, but no less instructive. The note ended with a single lightning bolt, drawn so sharp and clean it seemed to spark on the page. A sound from below snapped me to attention. The heavy, deliberate tread of armored boots on the ground floor. They weren't hiding anymore. They wanted me to hear them coming. Panic rising, I searched for a way out and spotted a half-hidden service door behind a collapsed cot. I forced it open and slipped into a narrow maintenance corridor. Faded strips of emergency lighting hummed weakly overhead, their pale glow just enough to guide my steps. I ran, each stride sending knives of pain through my ribs. The passage ended at a reinforced door, its locks long dead. Beyond lay the settlement's plaza, with the imperial shrine towering above everything else. In the daylight, I could see it had not escaped the Night Lord's hand. Its once bright walls were scarred with their mark, the winged skull painted on a massive scale, as if smeared in blood across the stone. I had no choice but to cross the open ground. Behind me, the door gave way with a crash. The measured steps followed, slow, steady, certain. They had no need to rush. I broke into a sprint, my body screaming but driven on by the raw instinct to survive. The shrine's huge doors stood slightly ajar, the black gap between them promising at least a moment's cover. Halfway across the plaza, the voice rose again, rolling like thunder across the square. Run, little one. Your fear gives wings to your feet. It is glorious to behold. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The doors grew closer, 30 meters, 20, 10. I slipped through and found myself inside the cavernous nave. Colored lights spilled from shattered stained glass, painting the dust that hung thick in the air. Unlike the settlement outside, the shrine seemed untouched, as though some thin veil of sanctity had held against the blasphemy beyond. I hurried past the rows of pews and stern-faced statues of saints, toward the great altar at the far end. A golden Aquila loomed there, jeweled wings spread wide. Behind it, a small door led deeper into the shrine. I pushed through just as the main doors screamed open behind me, their ancient hinges shrieking like tortured metal. Even here, you are not beyond our reach. The voice echoed through the vaulted chamber. The corpse god cannot protect you. He failed them. He will fail you. I shut the side door behind me, knowing the flimsy wood would never stop what hunted me, but needing the moment anyway. The corridor beyond was lined with small, stripped-out offices. At the far end, a heavy door bore the mark of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, an astropathic chamber. Every major shrine carried one, used to send messages across the stars through the Emperor's chosen. If by some chance, this one still functioned, if someone still lived, I might have hope. The lock held, but time had weakened it. I hurled myself at the frame, each impact a blaze of agony through my broken collarbone. On the third strike, the wood gave way, and I stumbled inside. The smell hit instantly, choking me. Rot, waste, and decay. I gagged, heaving up what little remained in my stomach. When my vision steadied, I saw him. An astropath still sat upon his throne at the center of the chamber, ringed by the strange machinery of his order. The astropath was still alive. His withered body was strapped upright in a cage of wires and tubes, some of them running straight into his flesh. A crown of copper and silver circled his bare skull, cables running from it to a massive vox array on the far wall. His chest rose and fell in shallow, trembling breaths. When I stepped closer, his head turned toward me, though his eyes were only black, empty hollows. The ritual blinding of his kind had been done long ago, but something had kept him alive far beyond his natural span. They come, he rasped, his voice dry as parchment. Always. They come to feed. I need to send a message, I said, moving toward the vox array. A distress call. Can you help me? His lipless mouth stretched in a grimace that might have been a smile. No messages leave this place. They made sure of that. They want no interference in their hunting ground. There must be something we can do, I insisted, running my hands over the controls, desperate for any sign of life in the machine. Some way to call for help. Help? He echoed, as though the word amused him. There is no help for Agrippina Minor. The Night Lords claimed it long ago, when the Emperor's servants abandoned us. Now it is their playground, their menagerie of fear. A thunderous crash echoed from the hallway outside. They were inside the shrine's offices now, moving from room to room. How long? I asked. How long have they been hunting here? Years. Decades. Time loses meaning when existence is only suffering. His skeletal hand beckoned me closer. But I have seen them, studied them, learned their weaknesses. Hope flickered in my chest, fragile, dangerous. Tell me. His fingers closed around my wrist with startling strength. They cannot abide the light, he whispered urgently. Not the light of stars or lamps, the light of the Emperor's truth. Their souls are shadows. Truth burns them like acid. Before I could ask what he meant, the door to the astropathic chamber exploded inward, splintering under a single blow from a powered gauntlet. A figure filled the doorway, a nightmare given form. Nearly 3 meters tall, clad in midnight blue armor draped with flayed human skin and decorated with faces frozen in screams. His helmet was a demonic mask, its red eyes burning in the gloom. A touching reunion, the Night Lord said, his voice the same that had stalked me since the forest. The blind messenger and the lost voidsman sharing last confidences before the end. He stepped into the room with the grace of a predator despite his size. In one hand, he held a wicked flensing blade that caught the dim light. In the other, a shock maul crackling with energy. I am Garrix the Skinless, he declared, as though announcing himself at a twisted court. Once of the 10th Company, now heir to the Night Haunter's legacy. And you, little ones, have given me most satisfying entertainment. The astropath's grip on my wrist tightened, bony fingers digging into my flesh. The light. He hissed too softly for even the Space Marine's enhanced hearing. Speak the truth they fear. I didn't understand, but staring at the monster before me, some instinct rose from deep inside. Words drilled into me since childhood. The catechism of the Imperium spilled from my lips. The Emperor protects, I said, my voice steady. His light drives back the darkness. His will guides the faithful. His strength shields the righteous. Garrix tilted his helmet as if curious. Prayer will not save you, little one. Your corpse god sits immobile on his golden throne, blind to your suffering, deaf to your pleas. But I can.